All right, I'm here with my friend Jake. Jake, you're in Texas, right?
I am right in Frisco, Texas, on the north side of Dallas Fort Worth.
Nice. Are you from Texas? Did you born and
Born
raised?
and raised, born and raised 2 hours east. I'm a small town Texas kid. So Friday night lights, piney trees, you name it, that's home.
That's awesome. My first interaction with a Texan was in the U.S. Army, and I remember I met him, and I'm like, "Where are you from?" And he goes, "I'm from Texas." And he goes, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm from Indiana." And he goes, "Oh, you're from North Texas." I said, "No, I'm from Indiana." He goes, "No, that's North Texas." I'm like, "Oh, all right, I get it, I get it."
Yeah,
So,
that's
at the United States Military Academy, you and I were just talking about that. My boys go there. I go there too. I mean, I went there too and graduated in '95. There's a lot of Texans that serve in the military. You guys definitely do your part in Texas. There's a lot of them, and they're all good people, man.
there is that. It's part of it I think is that independent spirit that we're just kind of ingrained from a young age here in Texas in pride and all of that. I've got three cousins that were Marines, and then one of my high school offensive linemen went to West Point. And
Oh
so
yeah, nice.
he played football there, and so he and I talked quite a bit. But yeah, I think that's a lot of it, right? It's just kind of the culture that has been born and bred in the state, and so I've got friends and people that have done it. I didn't serve, but I got family, like I said, and know a lot who have.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. I appreciate it. So, are you all things Texas as far as sports go?
Well, we gotta walk that line carefully. So I'm a TCU Horned Frog through and through. So
Yeah.
that automatically puts me against SMU, Texas, and A&M. I'm out the door
Okay.
there. I was raised by Texas Tech Red Raiders, so I'm there. When it comes to pro sports, Dallas Stars all the way. Texas Rangers since the day I could walk. Dallas Mavericks, even though they continue to toy with my emotions this year. But I've never been a Cowboys fan. Surprisingly, even though they were one of my speaking clients,
Uh,
I've not been it, mainly because growing up in East Texas, everybody's Aggies and Longhorns, right? Your
yeah.
big school state. Since my parents went to Tech, I was always the oddball. So it was kind of fun having a team that no one else you knew or in your town rooted for.
Yeah.
And when I was 9 years old, they announced Carolina Panthers and Jacksonville Jaguars as the NFL franchise teams. And I was like, that's it. And so I've got a Panthers helmet right over here
I
behind
see
me.
that.
I am a Carolina Panthers fan since day one. I go to a game every year in Charlotte or another city if I want to see a stadium. And so they're my non Texas team, which surprisingly, everybody's like, of all of the teams you don't root for, the Cowboys seem like the most odd because everybody's a Cowboys fan.
Yeah.
But yeah, everybody but me.
Yeah. The brand has kind of been tarnished. The Cowboys were good in the '90s, and now they're starting to. There's a long time since they've been really good in a long time. So I would have thought maybe you'd have been a Tennessee Titans fan because they're Houston Oiler days, or
The
maybe a
Houston
Tech
Oilers,
or a
yeah.
Texans fan.
And I don't have anything against the Houston Texans other than like Houston's kind of the rival everywhere else, right? Hate the
Yeah.
Astros, hate the Rockets. As a Mavs fan, grew up hating the Spurs, even though they were so good, right? You just hated them because Duncan and Ginobili and they were just so good. They were the rival because of Dirk.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of a harder pill to swallow. But pro sports for me, the Texans and those, I don't really have the rivalry like I do college. And
Yeah.
that's something that's like South, like
Yeah.
where I think like the North and in the Midwest, it's a little more of that pro rivalry,
Yeah.
Packers, Vikings, Bears, like we hate each other. Whereas the South is like Aggies, Longhorns, Red Raiders, Baylor, like we just, it's
Yeah.
way more ingrained. So pro, I have a little less hostilities toward than I do college fan bases.
So Texas Tech didn't Bobby Knight coach there?
He
Is that
did,
yeah, all right.
yeah.
So I lived in Bloomington, Indiana. That's Indiana University. So I remember Bobby Knight went there, and then his son coached for a little while. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
You got Bobby Knight towards the end.
My
That's
dad loved
fantastic.
it. Dad loved it, which is funny because Texas Tech's men's basketball struggled for a long time. They would have a good player here and there, but the program wasn't great. And so when Bobby came in, it was a really cool deal. I actually got my dad an autographed Bobby Knight picture for his birthday one year that still has it in his office.
That's
Um,
fantastic.
and that was obviously Bobby's later in his career, is kind of doing a little bit of redefining after the incidents at Indiana.
Yeah,
But he was a great coach. Great
yeah,
coach.
fantastic, man. It's funny. So he coached at West Point. He was a basketball coach. He coached Coach
Coach
K.
K.
And
Yeah.
Bobby Knight, he got inducted into the Hall of Fame here. And one of my good friends, she was a soccer player. She got inducted in the same class as him. And I wish I had done it. I thought about it. I thought about, hey, can you have him sign an Army shirt? That'd been cool. Have Bobby Knight
That'd have
shot it.
been
That's
awesome.
like, that would be like creme de la creme, but I never did it. And in
Yeah.
fact, he went back to Bloomington, Indiana when he, towards the end of his, because he had Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And my sons were playing high school. They were at high school at Bloomington South, and he would go to the high school games. Bobby Knight would, and set up in the stands and watch.
Love it.
And I had there was a high school coach at Bloomington North. He coached Bobby Knight's son in high school basketball. And Bobby Knight would come in and watch the games, and it was really unnerving. And one time,
Talk about
the coach benched Bobby Knight's son, and Bobby Knight called him, said, "Hey, I just got one question. Why'd you bench my son?" And he told him why. And he goes, "That was a good reason. That's all I needed to know." And got off the phone with him. He just, can you imagine? You got Bobby Knight on the line. He wants to talk to you why he benched his son. Now you're talking X's and O's with the general. It's fantastic.
yeah.
Fun fact: Dallas Mavericks. So my mom was in Home Interiors and Gifts. Are you familiar with Home Interiors? It's been a while. They started in 1950 some, and they
Okay.
anyway, so they were headquartered in Dallas, Texas, founded by Mary Crowley, who was a survivor of the Great Depression, a single parent, and she started out of her garage of her home. She built this massive empire. It was a multi-level marketing company. She ended up buying the Dallas Mavericks. She purchased them. She bought the bank that she got the loan from, bought the Dallas Mavericks, paid cash for them. And so my mom would go there every year for meetings and stuff like that, and she'd always go to the Mavericks games, and that was cool. So Mary Crowley, and and it's all females. It was an all female organization, and they owned the Dallas Mavericks for many years. And then she willed
Man.
it to her son, and then what's his name? Cuban bought it from him.
Yep.
So that was cool. So that was interesting that she owned the Dallas Mavericks for a while, privately owned. It's pretty cool. But anyway,
Man.
man, I'm looking forward to hanging with you. So I love
Yeah.
your title here, and it says compete every day. So you teach people to compete every day with themselves by winning the day. So let's just talk about that for a second. First of all, let's talk about the fact that you're a professional speaker. That's cool.
I, I am.
So am I. But
You and I
it's
have a fun career.
we have a great career, but it's not every day you just run into a professional speaker. I mean, think about people who are listening. How many people do you know, if you look at your phone, like, oh, yeah, that's Bobby. He's a professional speaker. That's Joe. He's a professional speaker. How often when you tell people what you do, Jake, they look at you like, oh, that's interesting. What's that all about? What's a day in a life for you as a professional speaker, Jake?
Man, answering that question, there's a little bit of hesitation sometimes in answering that question. And there's a few reasons why, right? One, you just never know where this conversation's gonna go. Because it's one of those careers, right? Everybody, I've always wanted to publish a book. I've always wanted to do this.
Yeah.
And so you get in those conversations. The other, as I have it here behind me as my daily reminder, is the Matt Foley Saturday Night Live Chris Farley skit of
Yeah.
Man in the Van Down by the River, right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's everybody's first impression. And I was, and so typically it's like, and I say professional speaker, and they're like, what? I was like, motivational speaker. Like and so then it's like all sorts of stereotypes, right? I sell pre-owned cars. I'm a lawyer. Like it's all the things that people have the ideas. And so it's always kind of interesting where the conversation goes from that, because they either want to tell you all about how they want to be a public speaker, or they're like, are you like Tony Robbins a little bit? I'm like, no, like same industry, very different. And so it's interesting, but I'll say that the coolest conversations are the people you get to come across who have interacted with a podcast, with a book, with something in your sphere, and you have no idea who they are, but they know you.
Yeah.
And they've seen you speak before, they've heard this. And those are always the most fun because, as you know, right, it's a lonely business. People think, oh, it's you're surrounded by people. I'm like, you're in an Uber, you're in a hotel, you're in a ballroom with people, but you're on stage. And then afterwards, you're kind of interacting with them, signing books, talking to people, answering questions. But then you're back to the hotel room and then to the airport and then back home to your family. And so it's a lot of just you time. And so you've got to be really kind of mindful when you run into those people, because it is fun that, okay, what I said on stage actually resonated, or like they heard it, like something implemented. And so that's always interesting. But yeah, I tend to lead with, motivational speaker. I help people compete with themselves. you interested in learning more? Like, how can I help you? Like, let's have a conversation. But then I typically try to do what all my really good friends know I do now, and they're really good at catching it, of like, tell me about you. Like, I always want to turn the script. I don't want to talk about what I do. And my friends are really good about it now, of like, hey, what's going on? I'm like, hey, tell me about that thing. They're like, no. I ask you, let's talk about you for a minute before we flip this script around. They're like, this is not what you normally do.
Yeah. You remember the first time you told somebody you were a professional speaker? It sounded weird, didn't it?
It sounded weird. I
Yeah,
mean,
I remember.
especially like, I think 2017, before Speaker Lab and the stuff we do. Like, I remember finishing like doing a talk, and like, I'm a speaker. And I was
Yeah,
like, I don't feel like a speaker. Like, I'm getting paid to do a talk, but I don't feel like a professional speaker.
yeah.
And it took a few years. I honestly had to have a friend earlier this year kind of sit me down and was like, hey, talking about social media and content, how I show up. And she was very clearly like, how you show up online is as this expert, and it's unrelatable. Where you are on stage is super relatable.
Hmm.
And she said, the difference, what I realized with you, and why I want to tell you this, is you're still trying to be the person that you've become. She's like, your
Hmm.
first year or two as a speaker, you were hesitant to, yeah, I'm a professional speaker, but you really weren't. You didn't have the full-time business yet. You weren't building the career with it. And so it didn't feel real. And so you're doing all of the things to justify like why people should hire you and do this. She's like, you've got the career now. Like, you're doing the thing, like, just show up. And so it's
Hmm.
funny, as you said, like, even just reflecting on that question you gave me, it felt weird because I didn't feel like I was. Now it's like, that's who I am.
Yeah. That's cool. I remember the person I told the first time. It was actually my daughter's softball coach, which is kind of weird. But I just remember he's like, "What do you do?" I'm like, "I'm a professional speaker." It just came out, and it sounded so freaking weird when I said it. And I was like, "All right, I guess I am." And once I got paid that first time, I guess I was a professional speaker. So that's a
You want,
fantastic lifestyle. But before we talk about what you speak on, so apparently you were a football player then, right?
I was a football kid growing up, high school through and through, football, track, little bit of baseball. Went to TCU to play, was a preferred walk on. So I got academic and athletic scholarship, and then got hurt
Nice.
the summer before I got there.
Yeah.
Rehabbed, and mentally was never ready for it.
Wow.
College, my first year, destroyed me. And honestly, confidence went out the window because I didn't know how to study. And I went from being
Mm.
a super smart kid in high school that could make A's without studying to failing tests and barely squeaking by. And I struggled from a competitive sense because I was always competing with another person.
Mm.
Anybody listening, if you grew up in a small town, I just got to be better than the one or two guys in my grade to have my position. And then as a
Right.
team, we have to be better. And I got into a position where I didn't have anybody to directly compete with. And I was depressed, and I had a loss of identity, and I struggled, and I just went in a hole. And so I walked away from the chance to compete and play because I was too afraid of failing, because I had the
Mm.
whole context of competition wrong. At the time, I didn't know it. At the time, it was listen to your gut, and I was out of my comfort zone. But years later, I understood what it was. I had a fixed mindset and fear around a loss of identity and changing identity, and I just struggled with it. And so,
Yeah.
honestly, like, that was the biggest pain of my life. It was the biggest regret, but it's also what ultimately planted the seeds for the work I do now. And so I wouldn't change anything about it.
Nice. So I'm assuming you were either a defensive back, a safety, or a wide receiver.
We met before, but no, I'm a 5'11" quarterback.
Oh.
I was
A running
5'11",
quarterback.
155 pounds. I was a passing quarterback. I could
Okay.
scramble a little bit. We ran a nice little spread in the early days of spread. We were a little more like Boise State's offense back in the day with some tricks and everything else. But played 2 years, playoff runs both years, quarterfinals 1 year, second round the next year, all district, um, offensive player, honorable state third team all state. We were 4A, so we were, out of the tiers in Texas schools, the highest was 5A at the time. We were a 4A school. So I
Nice.
had a pretty good high school career. And we had a great program in East Texas.
Nice.
And so, yeah, had a chance to play and fumbled it, but learned a lot.
Yeah. Well, I'm a Colts fan. I'm anything Indiana. So anything
Okay.
Indiana. So I'm a Colts fan. I'm an Andrew Luck fan. So
Oh,
he was a
yeah.
Texas prodigy,
Yeah,
you know.
buddy.
Yeah, so that was cool. I love watching him play. So
And your
track, what were
Pacers are in the
yeah,
Eastern Conference
they are.
Finals.
And my barber, it's funny, I live here in New York. I got to watch myself. My barber is he's an avid Knicks fan.
Oh
And
yeah.
so I got a haircut coming up, and depending on how it goes, I may have to cancel the haircut. I'm
You
afraid what he might do with my hair,
you
man. So
might.
yeah, excited about that. And the Indiana Fever, I'm a big fan of
Oh,
them. They're
buddy.
doing fantastic. So that's
Great
awesome, man.
start.
So
Yeah.
what'd you do in track? What'd you do there? What was your event?
Murder. It was the 800.
Oh,
I hated it.
geez.
I hated it. And I get forced on me. So our coaches in high school where you had to have an off-season sport. And so freshman year, I played baseball. I played baseball as a kid. I got hit in the face as a kid with a baseball. And so mentally, I struggled from that trauma of staying in the batter's box. And so I took years off, played soccer, football. Freshman year, go back out for baseball. Off season's great. Win the opening batter spot. I'm number one on the lineup. And the first game, I see curveballs for the first time in my life and just went 0 for 4 that first game. By the end of the year, I could hit some curveballs, but I was like, I hate baseball. So the coach was like, you're running track. Like, you have to have an off season. And I was like, okay, what am I doing? Like, I'm like, put me in the 400 or the 1600 meter relay. Those guys could fly. And so they put me in the 800. And the first track meet, you'll love this. First track meet, 2 days before the meet, I go out. The varsity track coach is like, here's what we're going to do. Sprint out the gate, first 100 to 200, stride for 600, and then sprint the last 100 to 200. So we do a couple of practice runs. Cool, no big deal. Show up at the track meet. I got my little track shorts on, jersey. All of that goes out the window. I dead sprint the first 500 meters. And I have a lead. And then I get on the back side of the track, and you just see
I know where this is coming.
Yep,
I've seen it too many times.
gorilla jumps on my back, and I just whoom. And then I still remember it, like my vision's going blurry. I'm trying to run. I see the first guy pass me. The second guy passes me. I finish third, cross the finish line, throwing up in the grass, whole body hurts. And I'm like, I never want to feel this bad again. It was the worst feeling in the world. And so I had to run the 800s for 2 years, and I dreaded it. And the only thing that I thought got me to that point of vision and pain was our last district track meet. We had a guy get hurt, and so I had to do the 1600 meter relay, and I was like the second leg. And buddy, I was moving at a pace around that track I didn't know I could move at, just keeping up. And I was like, that sucks about as bad as the 800, but the 800's a whole other lap of doing that, so I'm out.
That's crazy. So one of my sons, both my sons are on the track team here at West Point, but one of them's a sprinter, and he also is a football player. And he said he got injured more running track than he did in football.
I believe it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, okay, so your thing about compete every day, so that's based on your own personal story. You just lost.
Yeah.
Being a competitor, that was kind of your identity. It was kind of what you did, and then when you lost that competitive edge, you kind of lost your way. So was that kind of the genesis of how you came up with compete every day?
Yeah. So I grew up as the ultra competitive kid. As I laughed, I was 5'11", 150, 155 pounds. So I was never going to be the biggest, the strongest, the fastest. So for me, competition was the way to prove I could outwork you and outsmart you. Didn't matter the arena, school, grades, football, whatever. I just wanted to win. And so I love competition. But what happened is it became really unhealthy when my worth and my confidence were tied up in the results of competition with you, because I don't control that. And that moment in college, I was going through a season of life, 5 to 6 months, where I'm having to ultimately compete with myself, and I didn't know how. And so I lost all sense of identity and worth, and I struggled. I struggled because of the outcome. And so walked away from football. Nobody knew it. I blamed my shoulder. Literally, it was my dirty secret for years. Guys on the team would come out and watch me play intramurals, and they'd be like, you need to come play. I was like, shoulder can't, it can play intramurals. It can't hold up out there. And so it was this kind of dirty secret. And so years later, I read a book by a guy named Donald Miller called A Million Miles in 1,000 Years. And it shook my world up, because it's all about what makes a great story makes a great life. And at the time, I was a marketing consultant, and I was living a pretty crappy life. I was making great money, superficial relationships, partying on the weekend, 50, 60 pounds overweight, just not good. And so when I started rewriting my story, like any athlete, I went back to the gym, and it was like, can I do a little bit more weight? Can I play basketball a little bit better? And so that got back into this groove, but for the first time, I was competing with myself. I then ended up getting into CrossFit. A couple of friends talked me into checking it out, and they have leaderboards and they have times, but you're really like, what did I do the last time I did this workout? What was the weight? Did I go heavier? Did I go faster? And so I got into this rhythm of competing with myself. And when people would ask me about it, because not only physically did I change, but my confidence and how I started showing up changed, because it was less about how do I win my approval? How do I prove I'm better than you? To like, how do I just get better? And I would just tell people I'm competing with myself. And a lot of people are like, you should really do something with that. And so I spent 6 to 8 months tinkering with this idea of competing every day until my best friend, who was my roommate at the time, said, hey, there's a company out of Boston called Life is Good. He said it's a simple slogan. That t-shirt company, they do like 120 million a year. They're in airports, you name it. He's like, why don't you try t-shirts? And so I thought everything else I've tried doesn't work. Why not? And so I put some money into a couple of boxes of shirts and tanks that just said CED, compete every day, and started selling them out of the trunk of my car behind that CrossFit gym, and said, let's figure it out. And that's really how the whole thing started.
Wow, that's crazy. And so when you say compete every day by winning the day, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people focus on this idea of win the day. How do you win the day?
Mhm.
And it sounds great, but we're not going to win every day. Doesn't matter how good you are. You
Mhm.
never, in sports, you never win every game. You and I as speakers, we don't win every gig. Like, you're going to have days where you take an L. But the win is the thing that's outside of our control in life. Like, if we controlled outcomes, we could go down to the gas station, get a lottery ticket, we'd win the Powerball, right? We'd win every opportunity every time. But if you've ever pursued something, you know you don't control outcomes, you control how you show up. And the definition of competing is strive to gain or win something. The striving, the pursuit, that's what matters. And so for us, because that's 100% our control. So when I talk about, like, we strive toward victory every single day, but we understand victory isn't assured. So we have to focus on what's 100% in our control, which is how we show up, how we respond, and then the effort and attitude we bring. And so that's kind of what we talk about with teaching people of, like, when we say it's you versus you, it's essentially, how do you beat yesterday? How do you do a little bit more today? How do you look for opportunities where, man, I wasn't as locked in as I want to be as a parent today? What's one thing I can do today to improve on yesterday, right? How can I strive toward it? And it really just comes down to the idea of intentionality. At the end of the
Mhm.
day, it's waking up and making intentional movements toward a desired outcome rather than going through the motions, which will put you in place and position to be at a default outcome, which is that spot: fitness, career, relational, any aspect of life. It's that spot where we wake up one day and think, how did I get here? I have no desire to be here. This is not where I want to be. This is not where I envision my life, my relationship, my marriage, my parenting, whatever. What happened? That's the default that we ultimately end up if we don't wake up and strive towards something better.
Nice, awesome. And you written several books, and one of your books, I think it was one of your first book. You talk about there's key things that winners do every day. In fact, I think you said there was like 7 or 8 key things, something
Yeah,
like that.
seven choices to ultimately win at work and life. And
Yeah,
so, first book, compete every day. I've got 2 out, 3 and 4 literally in the next 6 months.
nice.
But we talk about the idea of, like, outwork your talent. So you talk, Angela Duckworth in her book Grit talks around the idea and all the research that shows talent is great, but effort and consistency are twice as important. The things 100% in your control are double as important as your talent. And
Right.
so what can you do to outwork your talent, right? It's regardless of how good or bad it is to always be consistent and always give your best. It's to never let those bad days that try to break us, right? What can you do to find good in the day? What can you do to find a lesson? And what can you do to make sure one bad day doesn't turn into 2, which will then turn into 5, into 10? We talk about loving the process. You preach this all the time with students at TSL, right? Of power hour, work the
Hmm.
process, because we get so fixated as a society on the outcome. We see the
Hmm.
stages as speakers, we don't see what goes into it. We see the weights you can lift in the gym, we don't see the work you put in to get there. And so it's really that idea of embracing the process. And then we talk about your environment. You're so mindful and so good about this, Eric, of being mindful of the people in your life. What do you do to spend more time with people that matter, and be intentional to be around people that not only make life better, but make you better, hold you accountable, have those tough conversations. And then we talk, kind of really the last couple are around this idea of you lead with your actions. As leaders, like, words are great, but your actions follow suit. As a teammate in sports, you can try to hold your teammates accountable, but if you don't model the behavior first, doesn't do you any good. We talk about always doing your best. That's the thing I think that separates a lot of people in life is the people who show up and say, I'm going to do my best regardless of circumstances, odds, attitude, whatever, versus people who let their efforts and their actions fluctuate based off, well, I really want to do this. I don't want to do this. I'd love to be here. I don't want to be here. And the last is just help others win too. From a leadership, from a legacy, from a life standpoint, great people are looking for a way to add value into others and help build them up. And honestly, like from a personal perspective, as we're filming this, like an hour and a half ago, I sat down and had a conversation with my media girl who's been with me for like 3 years. She runs Compete Everyday social media account, helps me create a bunch of content. And she was like, hey, I just wanted to let you know June's my last month. And I was like, oh, gut punch. But then she told me why. Because on the last 3 years, she's been on the side building her coaching business because she's passionate about fitness and coaching. And she was like, you've like poured into me these last 3 years. And like, I'm at a position now where like, I want to go all in to see if I can really make this work. And as we're filming content today and you're saying this, this, and this, all it's doing is re-echoing, like, I've got to do the things you're teaching me how to do. And so is that point of like, okay, like it sucks. It sucks to lose her because I love working with her. But like, I'm really excited because at the end of the day, our goal is not to build followers, is to how do we help other people lead better? And that's the work you do, and that's the work I do. And that's what I think matters for all of us, regardless of whether we sell widgets, we pastor churches, or we're a stay-at-home mom. It's how do we help others be better?
Yeah, I love that. In fact, I like the part where you said outwork your talent because I remember there's a book I loved that I read on John Maxwell. And John Maxwell, the book was Talent is Not Enough. And he talked about how talent can, in the beginning, and you think about high school and competing in grade school, the talented kids always outshine all the other kids, right? But
Yeah.
then at some point, the talent can only get you so far, and then there's a shift, and the shift is the work habit and the discipline, and then that starts to really show itself in your 20s and 30s, and the people that aren't afraid to work are the ones that ultimately win the game and are normally sometimes the least talented. Like you look at Tom Brady, I think when you look at his picture at the combine, it's like that dude is never going to be a 7-time Super Bowl winner, but the dude was just a worker, and he was able to overcome that. That's fantastic. I got a question for you. So
Yeah. It's actually funny you say that because I talk about Brady and Baker Mayfield and a few guys in the book that
Yeah.
there is a theory of compensation that when you are less physically talented, you carry a chip on your shoulder that forces you to overcompensate your physical abilities to outwork other people.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. So what I listen to a lot of Joe Rogan, and he
Yeah.
talks a lot about fighting. And he said something one time that kind of stuck with me. He's like, as soon as a fighter gets knocked out, they're never the same after that. They're different. Yeah, a lot of fighters have a hard time overcoming that. What do you say to someone who's trying to compete every day, but they get dealt a major failure, a major blow? And how do you overcome that? How do you get past that? And is there a process that you recommend that you felt that it's worked for you?
Yeah, so it's interesting you talk about the fighters because I think about like getting hit in the face with a baseball and never being able to sit in a batter's box again. Like even
Yeah.
if the ball's going over the plate, like it's coming at me. There's something in our brain that's going to trigger that trauma. There's a lot of work now that can be done through therapy, through working with sports psychologists that can help reprogram how we deal with that situation, because a lot of it has to do with the narrative and retraining the brain and the process. They've even showed guys will like go through watching their biggest failures through the lens of listening to like uplifting music and breaking it down. The best I've seen in regards to the biggest failures, we often replay those biggest failures over and over again as if we're a fan in the stands. We
Mm.
rewatch them and be like, oh, I wish I'd done this. I wish I'd done this. And that continues the spiral. There was research done with a 2004 Canadian swim team. And what they did is they looked at these swimmers who failed to qualify for the Olympics. So you imagine this. These guys have worked their entire life in the pool. Biggest thing to try to qualify for the Canadian swim team to go represent their country at the Olympics, and they fall just short. As you can imagine, when they watched the film of their race, they hooked all these guys' brains up to these brain scans, and they were overloaded with negative emotions, pain, distraught, depression, all of the typical signs you'd see in the brain. But what surprised them is the motor functions within their brain. I think it's the prefrontal quarter motex. I'm going to butcher that. That specific region that operates hands, limbs, everything else started to shut down, which signaled to the researchers that as they watched as passive bystanders, they were less motivated or inclined to get back in the water. There's something in their body that says, I don't want to feel this again. I don't want to go through this again.